Hi everyone, welcome to Web Weavers, Can the Internet Be a Feminist Space? A panel discussion by Kleio Collective for their digital exhibition and events program, Further Dusting, Future Lusting. I'm your host, Helena Aoalsteinsdottir, and I'm very excited to welcome our guests, Lauren Hill, Anneasha Hogan, Lidia, as well as Kleio's own Kana Higashino. This panel was recorded on Zoom, and we hope that you listeners will enjoy what we have to say.
Kind of cozy. So I guess I could introduce myself because you probably have heard of each other before since you're all part of the exhibition. But Kleio asked me to kind of host this conversation today. And my name is Helena, and I studied with the women of Kleio, actually, curation, last year. And my work is focused a lot on like feminist technology, or like more in the science fiction realm, but it has a lot of like similarities in kind of cyber feminism and sci-fi feminism. So I thought it would be such an interesting conversation to have with you guys. Should we just like start the conversation and just keep it casual, just like I think it will be really insightful, but just kind of a relaxed conversation about your work and just like thoughts about feminism on the internet.
I think so.
Well, I go next and I introduce myself, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist working with video, photos, installation, and activism. And my work starts with totally different things than feminism art years ago, and then I just took another path, and then when I came back to art, became everything very about feminism. But feminism for me is not about gender, it's about values.
Mm-hmm.
And if in the beginning was the exploration just about gender issues, now became something wider, literally, something that is embracing more and more about the connection that we have all, because gender oppression is just actually a little part of a big scale oppression that is happening everywhere for everything and everyone. So that's it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Maybe I should start by kind of talking about everyone here in the group as a whole, and then we can also go around and kind of introduce everyone briefly, if that's okay, just to kind of frame it a little bit. So today we'll be discussing the relationship between feminism, art, and the internet. We'll be exploring whether the internet provides a liberatory space for feminist thought and discussion, or whether it's yet another cog in the wheel of patriarchy. And I'll be discussing with three artists who are featured in Kleio's current exhibition, Further Dusting, Future Lusting, and Kana Higashino, member of Kleio's team, who was integral to the digital creation of the project, and therefore will be a great addition to the conversation. These artists work in diverse mediums with a variety of themes, but their work often shares a common location, which is the internet. So it'd be great if you could introduce yourselves. And Lidia, we had heard.
I've done, sorry.
That's wonderful. So maybe Lauren, you could tell us a bit about your work and how it kind of, thank you.
So I'm Lauren, and I've only sort of recently graduated from uni, and kind of how like Lidia mentioned, my work only started really becoming more sort of feminist orientated. I guess more recently as I started to kind of become more aware of stuff going on as my practice developed. I kind of work in any medium, from cake decorating and food to video and installation and ceramic. It really depends on the piece. I kind of look at the idea of kind of the depiction of female anger, the way that kind of the housewife is portrayed in certain characters in popular media, and kind of the idea of passive aggression and hysteria are kind of things that I like to look into. I often mix kind of quite old references with kind of more modern ways of like producing work. So I like to use kind of dated kind of media and then interpret that in kind of a more modern, like, I guess, like technological setting. So yeah.
Thank you. And Anneasha, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and your work?
Oh, sure. So hi, I'm Anneasha. Yeah, I guess I'm as like a Black female artist. I'm always kind of working from that vantage point, but I also work cross disciplines, like including soft sculpture, video, photography, painting, drawing, and I just like to think about the history of oppression and otherness and across multiple levels. Gender is definitely a very important one in the ritual of being a woman and doing womanly things, I guess.
Great, thank you. It's really interesting to hear about your works, and they're really varied, but I think we have a lot of things in common as well. So I wanted to open the discussion by questioning the nature of the internet and how well equipped it is to host feminist art and discussion. And it seems like a lot of the discourse on the relationship between the internet and gender can be pretty binary. And either the internet is described as a revolutionary feminist space, which operates beyond traditional power hierarchies, or like an inherently patriarchal technology designed and made by like the cis straight man, which mirrors the gender-based oppression of the physical world. In your experience, what does the internet offer you, and does the internet allow for more possibilities and open space for feminist thought and activism? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that the internet, it's such an interesting place because it feels like things can be a lot more fluid than in like the real world, and it feels as if being able to use like social media almost as like another kind of gallery space is really interesting, and I think it makes things happen a lot faster and a lot more kind of globally, which I think is really interesting, and especially now when it's needed more than ever for people to kind of be able to connect without the worry of like funds or like being able to reach the correct audience. Like I really think the internet makes that a lot easier, and kind of like you mentioned, although it's very much built by the kind of rich white male, much like every museum ever or like gallery, I think the good thing about the internet is that you can, although it's been created that way, it can really easily be kind of used and manipulated for more positive kind of information spreading, and I think that's a lot easier than with a museum or somewhere where there is the issue of like the whole structure and red tape and directors and people higher up who can control what's shown. And yeah, I think the internet is a lot more liberating because suddenly you don't have to worry so much about money or funds or things like that. So yeah, I think it has definitely got its positives when it comes to showing work.
So do you see a lot of can you see a lot of differences in the opportunities that you can get or make yourself in the real world, or like and the internet, kind of the digital world as such?
Feels like the internet is a lot more transparent, not necessarily everywhere, but I think that it feels a lot less exclusive, especially when it comes to social media. It feels like information can spread well, and there isn't a kind of, there is a hierarchy still, but I think that I don't know if it's perhaps less intense than it is in kind of the physical art world, and I think that opportunities are far more open and public, and that is just generally helpful as a younger artist trying to start out. It feels a bit less, I think, because we're all really familiar with the internet. We've been using it for a long time, whether just kind of, you know, casually, but we know how to navigate it a lot more than I would know how to navigate a room full of art directors or a room full of museum curators. So I think it being kind of everyday and recognizable is helpful.
And kind of leads me to this. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I agree. I think there's a lot of accessibility, but there's also the illusion of accessibility sometimes, or the, there's like social movements are moving a lot quicker and like able to mobilize, but there's also like slacktivism and like these issues with actually getting out of the home, well, also being in quarantine, but I think that also I think like censorship being an issue is a similar but different issue to kind of institutional and accessibility that can allow us, it allows us to have like kind of the ability to connect and spread information quickly, but also yeah.
Definitely, and we'll talk more about censorship later on, but this makes me also think about if the internet can be a truly feminist space if it's not created by feminists, like the coding and its actual infrastructure is usually not created by feminists. So do you feel like it is enough to be able just to post or participate in the internet, or do you feel like it can truly be a feminist space unless it's coded by feminists?
I'm not really sure that the problem is about the coding, the infrastructure, but the problem is more about the pushing on the content. And because I mean, coding infrastructure is okay, is how all this is used and how all this is pushed. That is a little bit connecting also with the previous question that I agree with both of you, that is a great place for building connection, communicating without having, you know, to find the main gallery representing you and the curator. And but at the meantime, you have, you know, if you get in touch with also quite normal social media gallery at the moment, and you say, oh, you know, I'm doing this, and they say, yeah, you know, but you don't have enough followers, and you think, it's not the value of my work, it's about the followers. And this is not about the infrastructure by itself. Also, if we, as women, we start to code everything, you know, to build the physical space of internet, is what is pushed by an agenda that is still not, from my point of view, so controllable from us, from women, is still so much in the hands of this entity that is the economy, that is the market, and that actually doesn't want women, doesn't want really so much feminism, because feminism is about equality, it's not about private property, it's not about free market and competition. Instead, it's about collaboration, it's about building together. So I think that the main problem is this, and I'm not really sure how we can, I don't know, give a push for jump this huge, massive problem. I mean, it's really something big.
It feels like oh, sorry.
Oh no, sorry, continue.
You go ahead.
I was just well, a lot of what Lidia was saying was resonating with me because of how we kind of created Kleio as 5 women who were trying to create a feminist platform that was supposed to be something that was long term. And for a long time, you have to think about what kind of feminist space you want to be and how you are going to fit in this space. Kind of similarly as to like a physical space where you fit, the internet, you also kind of have to figure out where you're going to fit there too. And also kind of understand who you can collaborate with, where are your kind of avenues. They can be quite overwhelming because it seems like you have so much area and territory to cover. But a lot of what Lidia was saying was resonating, that there are a lot of obstacles, even though it feels like free range. The internet feels like free range in a way.
And sometimes the obstacles, they come also from women. And this is the most painful thing when you build this connection and collaboration, you try to build this with women, and they are the one that, you know, and I must say that is more with sort of middle-aged women than with young women. It seems that literally the young generation, they have this need of changing and collaborating, and they understood how important it is to say, you know what, competition doesn't work. Instead, I saw in some feminist environment and organization quite tough environment and painful for me.
Do you think that's because of like maybe a generational gap in how social media is used amongst different generations that might have created more of that collaborative like behavior?
The talk that has been through the social media help a lot, but I think that what helped literally is the sort of evolution. I strongly believe in evolution of every species, and I strongly believe that there is a emotional and mental evolution through education, because you know your parents, they've for sure been different than mine. The sort of value they gave to you and they pushed make of you different sort of human being with different needs, less focused in achieving some sort of thing, but more focused in achieving something else. So it becomes a collaboration, because through the internet we can spread the call about what we care about, the change that we want. And but at the meantime, there is this new generation that they are more willing about really changing, not just half change. You know, I went in a lot of feminist talk and conference since when I started my feminist work, because it's not been always feminist. And one of the painful things for me has been going to Filia, Women of the World Festival, and hear a lot of women talking about moving money from one place to another. And the point is, yes, money, I can understand, but money actually is the problem. So how can we eventually jump this problem? If we can't move money from a place to another, we are stuck. So let's try to find different way. And the only woman that I found about my age has been just one in one of these conferences, saying we should start to use our free time for the community, like over the weekend, go and give free time for educating. And instead I see much this concept from young women than women of my age. Sorry, I'm the oldest one here, so I'm 46.
I think what I found is I only kind of moved to London a few years ago for university, and that's when I started to like really use social media and also the internet as a tool for my work, and also as a way of communicating. Like I think a lot of people, particularly people who have kind of equality on their minds and who are younger, and particularly in light of what has been happening recently, the internet can be a really useful tool. But I found that for like generations before me, that the internet, particularly I think because I'm in lockdown, I'm in my family home, and I think I forget that for some people who are of older generations, the internet is more of like a form of entertainment or like a social platform. So for example, on Facebook, I know a lot of people in like the area I'm in now would never dream of posting anything political or anything like that. It's a place to share going for a nice walk in the woods, or like what meal you had last night. And I think there's like a difference between that and the younger generation really using it as a actual tool. And I think that's because we have it as the norm. It's like this, it's not really a novelty for us. So we don't kind of see it as something that's just for like having a laugh with friends with. We see it as actually like a real part of society and a real way to communicate, and you can see the effects of it. So I don't know, I think that it's kind of sad to think that there aren't so many other people kind of, Lidia, at your age and kind of joining in, and it's really great that that we can kind of encourage older people to do so. And yeah, I think it's quite funny that there's like a difference between just a social platform and like an actual tool for change.
Yeah, I think we accelerated communication in an interesting way for younger generations, where to the point where you can see an image and it's referencing 5 different things, and like trying to explain that to an older person is like, oh, there's this meme which comes from this show, which is this, and it's so just like, it's so specific and so easy to kind of work with really complex abstract ideas that are just with a single image or a weird tweet or something.
Yeah, we're just it's just been this kind of on the same topic, but I did want to ask you questions about this, kind of how, because the internet is such an inclusive space, but apparently it's maybe less inclusive for the older generations. But it is the beauty of the internet. It's unaffected by the boundaries such as geography, race, and class. So you talked a little bit about your experience of this, but have you found it in that sense to be an inclusive space, and have you been able to create new connections and to like support activist networks within the internet? What's your experience of that?
For me, I think that it's been, I've had moments where the internet was really useful, where I physically couldn't, like currently or when I was in high school, where I physically couldn't connect with people who were like-minded, but there's definitely always kind of a need to step outside of it and make IRL connections and do like a, because I think the danger of kind of like these censored space is like the surveillance of it, and if there's any idea that's like considered a bit more radical, it can be, there's like a fear surrounding that for people even speaking on it, or even, that's kind of what when it comes to like speaking of like older people on the internet, that's like kind of something that I notice from their interactions, is like not feeling comfortable sharing or like being vulnerable, I guess. And that's like a real valid concern.
I think, Lidia, your work has been censored before, hasn't it, in the past?
Yeah, and to be sure that today I went through again, it's very interesting the way that has been censored, and it's something that upset me quite a lot about the internet. I have a quite conflictual relationship with internet. I think that is brilliant for something like connection and learning. I mean, I couldn't connect and I couldn't learn some sort of things without internet in the real life. But at the meantime, there are some things that I can't understand and I can't control, and I don't have any sort of explanation. So I give you few examples, and if I bother you and I talk too much, just tell me, Lidia, enough. But so in the 2018, the UN Office for Drug and Crime published this study on global homicide. I don't know if you read it about. And on this study, there was a specific booklet about gender-related killing. And for me, it was absolutely shocking reading the number of women that were killed by here. I mean, 50,000 women killed by intimate and former partner and family member worldwide in 1 year. And then going through the breakdown of these numbers and discovered that in Europe, 3,000 women killed in 2017 by former or intimate partner of family members. So let's avoid, we are just talking about active femicide, okay, not passive femicide. So we are not talking about victim of sex trafficking, of gangs and work slavery or neglected medication and stuff like this. So is still not exact number. And we are talking just about the cases that have been reported to the police and recognized as a femicide. So I've done a research about the number of people killed, victim of terrorism. Actually, the victim of terrorism, the relationship was 1 to 16. So 16 times more of women that have been victim of femicide than victim of terrorism. And I just started to talk with people about femicide, and I discovered that a lot of people, they didn't know what was femicide, and became an obsession. I had this sort of life mission about, I need people to know. So I've done this project that the first time was in the 2018. I paid, no, in the first time was 2019, but March for the International Women's Day. I pay advance. I spent £1,000 of my money for having this massive sign saying what were, I think that the number of victims of terrorism was 289 or 279, and the number of victims of femicide was 3,000. And I had this van going around with this massive sign. And the first censorship that I had was from these people of the ad van, because they sabotaged my project. So they arrived with 4 hours of delay, saying that they had a problem with the van. Then they didn't put the graphic on the back. And when I got mad because they didn't put the graphic on the back, and so I was calling the company and crying and shouting like a hysterical woman, finally they put the graphic on the back, but was the wrong one. So it's been traumatizing for me, and I decided to redo the project. For redo the project, I've done the 16 days of activism, that is this UN initiative that I think that all of you know, from the 25th of November until the 10th of December. And I decided to go out with this writing on me as a sandwich woman and talk with the sandwich board woman and talk with the people. But I thought at the meantime to put out on internet all these signs, all these graphic with that I took numbers from the UN report and posted on Twitter and posted on Instagram. And something shocking happened on Twitter. Instagram, they were going out, and Twitter, they were not published with the primary hashtag, just with the secondary. So 16 days of activism, or 16 days, or make world orange, I think that was another one, and nothing. They were not just going out. But for instance, stop femicide, or no una más, or another one that I can't remember, another hashtag in French, they were appearing. And for me, it's been really, really painful, because I also got in touch. Basically, there was a dedicated page about the initiative of the 16 days of activism. And you could advertise, you could put on the calendar your event. I got in touch with them, writing, I'm doing this event. Actually, they didn't get back to me ever. And I just realized that all the other events were events done by organization. The point is that I was not an organization, so somehow I didn't have rights to be alive. And that has been really, really shocking for me, because I think that one of the great things about the internet is that gave the chance to everyone to talk, to speak out. You don't need to be part of a group, of a team, and you can have your voice, your point of view. But see, when the mainstream actually doesn't want you as an individual, but wants you inside a group. I don't know, it's been quite painful, and I couldn't do anything about. And I had instead with Instagram a slightly similar but less painful thing. I do this work with Barbie's doll, and I just enacted this kind of pretty disturbing scene. But sometimes people, they don't even understand that they are disturbing. They laugh actually when they see it. Then they have to see better and say, oh, what's going on? But they are quite disturbing, and I start to post them on Instagram with the hashtag, different hashtag connected with Barbies. And I just realized that nothing that is with the hashtag Barbie or Barbie Lives appear. I also took two computers, not the same computer and post and then go, no, two computer, check both computer, post with the telephone and check with both the two different hashtags. And the post doesn't appear. So clearly there are, because it's such a big brand, Barbie, and is a corporation that has intention to promote that sort of vision of the world that is unreal, that sort of vision of women that is unreal. Clearly they have some sort of filter, I don't know, because my girls' world pictures, they didn't appear ever with the hashtag Barbie or Barbie words or Barbie lifestyle, something like that. Instead, they appeared like dolls installation, dolls photography, but not with this connection of the major hashtag for Barbie. I think that there was one hashtag that I found, but the main one, no. And this is, again, kind of shocking because they can, I mean, they can do whatever actually, because at some point I couldn't post with my mobile because I had a problem with the mobile, and I learned how to post through the computer, through the browser. If you go to a development tool, you can literally post on Instagram, but they catch you in not less than 1 day and they stop your computer. They stop me free computer, a desktop and 2 laptops. So the point is that clearly they have filters, they can track down what they want and what they don't want. And for some reason, my stuff on Twitter about the 16 days of activism, I don't know why, they didn't have any interest that appeared. That for me was weird because I was posting these signs that are literally connected with the content of the UN document, of the UN report. And then I was connecting the link of the UN report because the majority of my work is about researching, and the visual part is just for having attention of people with the hope that they go on my website and they go to click to the links and see what's going on with their eyes and possibly get pissed off and start to do something as well. So I didn't write any personal point of view, something offensive, aggressive, or so I don't have any reason why I was the only one seeing my post. So this is my experience. That is quite shocking if you think that they tell you that they can't track down, you know, pornography, violence, and pedophilia, and it's, sorry, you can track down me that I post something about Barbie, and you can't track down about this other sort of stuff. It seems to me that there is more an agenda about interest. So anyone else had some experience about censorship from internet?
I have, oh, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I haven't personally, I kind of am aware of what to not post or whatever, but I have learned a lot about algorithmic bias and how, because I have friends that are more kind of in entertainment industries who have taught me these little tricks about when you post and how you post, and I think that that's always really interesting to me, how these things are just coded into these social networking sites to keep certain voices down, and that you have to work against actively if you want to, like, it's
It's so funny because it reminds you of how much the internet is an institution, basically. Like social media, although it is far more accessible than big, huge corporations, things like that, there is still a hierarchy that has literally been built into it, and it is there to benefit certain people, and it's there to silence other people. And I think I like try and see the internet as like this really positive thing that is kind of great for people who are kind of starting out in their practices or businesses or whatever, but it's really kind of disheartening when you remember that the internet is actually, it's not all as forward thinking as you think it is, and it's still built on not great ideals, and it is, yeah, essentially it's still an institution, and there are like things happening that we don't see, and it's still quite, even though I see it as transparent, there are layers to that, and we can only really penetrate some of them, which is, yeah, interesting, but annoying.
Yeah, frustrating, because it's literally, as you said, is institution. It's just part of a system, and it's made for supporting the system. That for me is the shocking thing about what appear so clear with all the problem of the COVID-19, is to see how actually the social and economic system doesn't really work. But now that the lockdown is a little bit, there is just this big necessity about going back to normal, and there is not a talk about, apart you in the United States, thank you for being just so upset and so brave and try literally to do something, because this is the point. Internet is great, but then the physical world, we can do things just if then we go in the street, because if we're just staying going in front of our computer and we do a revolution in front of the computer, the people that they are in the government, in the lobbies, the one that they have power, fucking care about us. So thank you so much. You don't know how much I'm proud of you. And so this is the very frustrating thing, that what appear with all these viruses is that everything is just about supporting these economic and social system. And now that we had the chance for a big change, is not actually happening. There is a fight to go back to normal, instead of saying, you know what, it's not been our choice, we've been obliged, so let's try to do all our best to develop this change that we have been obliged for, what is 3 months, something like that, maybe 4. And these apply also to the art world. I'm very interested to see, when we will go back to normal, what we will be able to save of what because I didn't build anything. I mean, I'm feeling very guilty about the only thing that I've done has been researching and doing my art. Is great instead about people that they put an effort for building platform and organizing event and trying to push, where they put their own work without being paid 1 penny. Thank you so much. It's just unbelievable. But I'm curious to see what will happen at the moment that we will go back, if we will be able to save some of this change. And sorry, I jump a little bit because it was the internet that is frustrating. This is my problem. I jump quite a lot. But the internet has been invented. The idea behind internet was great, but then it's been taken over from the system. This is the problem. How can we have it back? Or how can we make it again somehow normal, natural? This is just so maybe the women, they shouldn't learn to code for building the infrastructure, but for hacking everything and for destroying the infrastructure, for becoming a pain in the ass. Maybe is this what we should do? I don't know. Sorry, my political moments.
No, that was a really great because it was making me think about when Anneasha was also talking about hierarchies or algorithmic biases, and Lauren talking about certain hierarchies that exist in the digital world, and how I kind of see it as a parallel to the physical world when we're talking about art and activism. So what kind of artworks are we seeing and not seeing in museums or art fairs? And then also seeing that a lot of art and activism that tries to counter those structures, and like, for example, public art or anti-art fairs, etc. And
I
was
don't
just
hear you
thinking
anymore.
about,
What happened?
oh, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, now yes.
Sorry. And I was just thinking if you guys know of any examples of feminist activism or artwork that is trying to counter those digital hierarchies in a way that maybe the physical world that exists in the physical world too.
I think that, Lauren, I wanted to ask you something similar. Like, if we talk
Sure.
to your work, especially because you work with a lot of feminist critique, but your digital work is there's quite a difference between your digital work and your sculptural work that you do as well. So, because you work with GIFs a lot, for example. So maybe this could apply to your work if we spin it back to, because I would like to hear more about your works as well, just in like in particular.
Sorry, you
yes,
go.
yeah, it's just wondering about kind of the difference between your work, what you choose to work in the digital sphere, and then versus the kind of the sculptural work that you make, for example, how you utilize the spaces differently.
Yeah. So in terms of digital work, that's sort of it's what I've been developing. Like, I did it mainly at the end of my degree, and to be honest, my actual kind of knowledge and ability with the digital is very limited, which is why I started working with things that are so rooted in like everyday usage of technology. So before that, all of my work was very sculptural and very physical, and I'd always work with making sure that the work was quite tangible and visceral, and kind of that's how you kind of interact with it. I wanted it to be kind of recognizable, and the way that my physical work would play with perhaps different recognizable materials and objects and putting them together to kind of cause a friction between them. For example, my degree showpiece, I piped decorative royal icing onto a toilet, and there are two kind of very recognizable things. When you put them together, they kind of say something different. And I think when I started using kind of digital processing, so like GIFs and boomerangs and filters, I wanted to do something that was similar to that, but almost using like the digitalization of something as like another material. So with the prize bird piece I did with the chicken, which is so visceral and disgusting, and like you can't escape the fact that it's not an object that you'd want to see much, but like it's not something you want to spend much time paying attention to. And I like the idea of doing, I guess, applying a process to it that you would with something that you want to display on social media. So I put a filter on it, and then I turned it into a boomerang, and then just in case I hadn't done enough, I also turned it into a GIF. And I really like the idea of kind of mixing the visceral with the digital, and by doing that, I think it kind of is a new way of displaying something. And I think I wanted to do that to kind of think about how we display ourselves on the internet, and how the internet is almost an extension of like the everyday performance of ourselves. So when I look at domesticity, I think about the idea of the performance in the home and having to try and be tidy, and these kind of leftover ideals from like the height of the domestic time in the 50s, how I think they are still applied today, just in a very different way. And I think social media plays a part in that. So the idea of taking something so specific and like repulsive as a raw chicken and applying these ridiculous processes to it, apart from just thinking that it's kind of amusing, I think I like to do these things as a way of just like highlighting the way that we kind of elevate our everyday on the internet, and the idea of like literal sugarcoating, but with the digital. Yeah, it's kind of what I work through with the digital kind of stuff I make.
I just had a question for you actually, Lauren, because I actually was lucky enough to see your work at Chelsea.
No way.
Yeah, because I am a Chelsea graduate. I graduated in 2018 doing the fine art program, and every year since I've been there, I always go to the degree shows. And I remember looking through your website being like, oh my gosh, I've actually seen your toilet piece in person, and it made me realize how different it is to see your two different kinds of work, one of them kind of designed for a physical space and seeing that in a physical space, and then seeing a work that was kind of more digital in nature, and then also adapting and seeing that on a digital exhibition. So I was just wondering if for you, how possible is it for you to translate a physical piece to a digital space, or do you kind of see them as separate kind of things, like you would never want to show a physical object in a virtual world like your toilet?
I think the work that I've been recently producing in lockdown has definitely been like made thinking about it being put into the digital world, whereas my degree showpiece, which actually thinking about it is quite weird, because I literally plonked like video pieces right into the physical like appliances. So I had like a toilet, and it had this icing on it, and then if you look into like the toilet bowl, there was a video showing a GIF, and it's such a clumsy way of putting it together. Like, it really is not very advanced when it comes to the working of the digital. I really am like a beginner when it gets to that, which I'm okay with. I think that because in my work I use such recognizable objects, then I was like, well, why don't I just use recognizable processes that are as accessible as the objects that I use? And I think trying to translate something as like textured as those objects that I've made with icing is quite difficult to translate properly digitally. I think that's like with a lot of artwork, when you photograph it, it definitely loses some of its physicality. But it's actually something I've been thinking about, and I've been trying to think about, I can translate things okay from physical to digital, but I've never worked backwards, and whether it be possible to kind of not just make something physical digital, but whether I could take some like a digital image or a process and try and apply that physically with materials that I've used before. I think I've been trying to recently use the digital in the process. So previous to this, it's just been another way of displaying my work. So like for the last few years, I'll make something that is meant for a show, and then kind of putting it somewhere digital is a bit of an afterthought. Whereas recently I've been trying to think, okay, if I build that into the way that I make it, then it's not going to be just easier to kind of show on a media platform, but it's also going to be more effective. And I think that's something that I'm still sort of working out, but it's been a lot easier to think about it that way when there's nothing that you can really do physically with shows and anything like that. So I think it is like a good way forwards when you're thinking about putting your work out there. I hope that kind of answered your question, but
yeah, definitely did.
And it sort of reminds me of your work, Anneasha, when that you have at the Kleio's exhibition. It's called But I'm Having So Much Fun, when you actually pair video footage from Kanye West's video and videos of yourself dancing at home. So then you're actually pairing the kind of two kind of the tangible home video to a really processed and produced music video. So do you see parallels between your work and kind of, or the process, your process and Lauren's process in that sense?
Oh, definitely. I think I also have a way of, I have like kind of multiple practices where I have my digital work that's very, kind of in the same way, using accessible technologies, except for maybe like Adobe Premiere or something, of course. But for the most part, using like screen recordings and kind of collecting like an archive of images from my life and mixing those with images from the internet. And I think that my kind of physical work, I'll still kind of take ideas from the internet or from media, but I'll make them physical. Like I have a piece where I take an image from a meme, and I don't explain the image at all. So, but I have instructions on the screen that say, like, look at this image, start the timer, lay in the grass, tell the person to move. And so there's no reference to this meme, and some people walk up and they laugh, and then other people walk up and they're like, what does this mean? Is this a memorial? What's going on? Is this and I like that kind of confusion about these images and these things we're constantly consuming. So I think that but like you said, about kind of capturing objects, it's not, I think like the internet should be kind of like considered another site, and it's another site specific place to work with, instead of just kind of this kind of documentation space.
That makes me really think about like, if there are two different spaces, one being kind of the physical space and the digital, then is that two different types of feminism or feminist activism going on? Like, do we have to kind of subcategorize that, because the way we approach feminism and activism on these two platforms are very different in a way? So is there such thing as like digital feminism or like digital activism, I guess, as a category?
I think so, because I think when you're working online, the reach is so much wider that you have to take so many different opinions into consideration, and so many different, like, you're working with like the image of yourself versus like yourself, or these objects that you've created that come from you, and it's like you have to like work like and that's kind of what I was trying to deal with in my piece, is working against this like image of yourself, and working with this image of yourself to meet whatever goal you're trying to, even in for some of my piece was more about like kind of, it's as an artist, but it's also just existing and being a woman, and how you're presenting yourself daily, with gestures and with what you're choosing to like identify with or align yourself with.
I think that like when we think about historically, the idea of like presenting ourselves has always been such a physical thing, and now it feels like there's almost two battles. There's like, I have to present myself kind of physically all the time, but also I think there's so many different ideals over how you present yourself on the internet, and trying to like go against that, or to trying to doing that in a way that is like true to how you want to be seen, is so difficult, because the internet is almost like this black hole that you can put something out into, and unlike a physical audience, you don't have any control over how someone perceives it, and you can obviously, all you can do is do something that is like true to what you want to say, but it's like a whole other minefield of representation and interpretation, which I think is, for like a lady, is like a double kind of whammy of stuff to wade through, which is kind of interesting, but also I think a bit tiring sometimes.
Yeah, it's something I definitely feel on social media, and I wonder if social media is giving us kind of giving us this more kind of confines of how to present yourself as the ideal woman, or like if it's pushing femininity in a direction that we don't want it to, or if it gives us actual space to kind of critique this kind of desirable femininity aspect of being a woman. What do you think? Do you feel like social media is having like negative impact on that, or do you think it's positive?
I think that you can find a space for a critique, but are so much more difficult to find this space that instead a space that push this unreal image of women and femininity. But it's not just about women anymore, you know, also boys. It's just ridiculous. These human beings that are not human being anymore, they are just these eternal young and super fit and super cool creature that actually life is not this. And that is what, at least this is what I can see, and this is what arrived to me. This is the main thing, the main message. Now I can't even remember. I had a couple of experience of some celebrity that they were calling themselves feminist with the tits here, and writing, "I'm a feminist," and it's just, yeah, you are. I'm sure that you are, because a feminist is about values, about what you believe in. But then the way that you propose yourself, you possibly don't even realize, because it became so, this a sort of hyper normalization about these women, that they are constantly super attractive, super sexy, super, and above all, if you are a person, you know, a famous person, a celebrity, and this is all pushed madly by internet. I mean, and it's all, again, not because internet cares, but it's because it's a way for supporting the economic system. So if we want to be cool, we have to spend money. That's it. It's so simple like that. It's not because that makes us happy, because actually makes us very unhappy to try to be constantly in that way. So it's a very, again, conflictual thing. You have a lot of that message, but clearly, if you put an effort, you can have so much more chance, possibly, that in real life, to find a place where you can create this sort of connection and put in discussion everything. But you need to work hard. At least this is my experience. It's not so simple. Doesn't arrive so for free. I mean, in this case, I have really to thank you, because you, at some point, you let me know that there was your open call, and for me it was fantastic, because actually it was something really close to my work and to my path in this moment. And it's fantastic being here talking with you, because it's an interesting talk, and also because we are so two different generation, that it is very interesting for me, mixed up, and maybe feed a little bit each other. So thank you so much. But it's been strange if something like this arrived for free without me struggling madly for finding it, and for have a little bit of entrance in this, and, you know, and say, yeah, I'm here.
And Kana, because of COVID-19, it had to like rethink about the launch of your collective, and that also maybe because you had to do this online, that brought forth this connection with you and Lidia, for example. Maybe you wouldn't have found each other in a different situation. So how has this lockdown and COVID kind of affected Kleio? And can you tell us like how it was to build the collective online?
I have a question for you, actually, that now I think that is a sort of good moment. About you, because if I read well, you come from a curatorial environment, and you study about curator. What do you think will be the future, actually, for you? Because I think that as much can be difficult for us as artists, because I don't know you girls, but I think that my art doesn't have market. My art, honestly, became my life mission, a very expensive hobby. I work as a mad for earning money, and I put everything there. I don't know if I will earn ever money. I know that a lot of people, too often, they tell me that is unnecessarily disturbing. Yeah, but, you know, yeah, it's very funny, very interesting. Yeah, but I don't want to have that in my house. It is just when I go around and I give for free postcards of my baby tea, and I have literally people telling me, yeah, it's very funny, very interesting, but no, thank you. And, you know, it's a little bit disturbing. So this is the reality of us as artists. It was difficult outside. I think that is difficult also on internet, earning money, but at least on internet we can be seen more. But as a curator, I think that is ridiculous also for you, the situation, because the majority of people studying in the art school, not only as an artist, but also as a historian, as a curator, are girls, okay, are women. But then when you're having a real life, no work for ladies. Ladies are literally totally cut out, and what you can do is become, assistant or whatever, some small gallery, but not on the major institution that they represent art, and as well eventually in the school system. Do you think actually that through this situation that is happening with the COVID and gave you a different chance to show your skills as a curator, because renting a gallery for sure has a different space that renting the internet space, and you have more chances to be seen worldwide. Do you think you will have a chance to see a change for you as a curator, as a curators?
Yeah, I couldn't help but thinking that I think often as a woman or as any person from a minority group or an oppressed group, you kind of often have to get creative in order to get your work forward, or to, like, I studied art as well, and I practiced as an artist for a few years before I got into the curation, and I always I thought like the only way for me to show my work is if I show it myself. So I started to hijack like underground parking spaces and put up shows there for 12 hours, or get my show on like independent radio shows, like to just find creative ways where I could kind of manipulate my work into fitting into alternative spaces. And I think when you are a minority group, you are constantly kind of forced to be more creative. So I think when it comes to kind of a global epidemic like this one, you already have those tools, you already are quite creative. So you find ways to navigate maybe quicker than some people, even though you have less power. So I think it kind of comes, you're constantly living in this kind of challenge. So when another challenge comes along, you find a way to navigate through that. And I think during these times, you have found ways to connect to new people, and I definitely see maybe, I don't think there will be a crazy big change that we are kind of hoping for, because people keep talking about the new normal or things going back to normal, which I don't think is something to celebrate necessarily. But I think there are definitely kind of new ways to think about things, like how can we do things differently? And we've obviously already seen some changes and some new platforms come forth because of this. But I'm not sure, like, to answer your question.
Yeah, my question was more, if I haven't even been so clear possibly if there will be a chance, that then in any case will be also the question that I had at the end for my colleagues. If we think that at the end, after all this, we'll have the chance to transfer a little bit of what we have been able to build and create through the internet to the real world, if we see any sort of chance. And for me, it was interesting for you as a curators, because artists, I think we are so many, and if you really believe and if you really feel your art, no one stop ever to create. But for curator, there has been a totally new opportunity in this situation, because actually the real gallery, they were closed. You know, everyone start to be online and try to push things online. And at some point you asked me to talk specifically about shears, and then eventually at some point we talk about shears, we will talk a little bit about them. But for instance, before them, there's been a couple of other people that straight away they were, whoa, an exhibition online, and they were talking about that straight away as soon as we had the lockdown. So it's been a lot about being quick. And for instance, now a lot of people, they do the masks with writing, but when I started on my path with the researching the COVID, I had this thing about the talking masks. And for me I had all this idea, but I had to stop with other stuff and start to do that, because I don't want that then someone will tell me that I copied, because just arrived as soon as I had the lockdown, this thing arrived in my mind. And so as a curator, by the way, is different, because the work that you have to put in curating an event and, you know, organizing all that and set up all the platform and the graphics and everything is quite incredible work. And I don't know, if I was you, I had the hope, and maybe will be the time that I have a little bit of a chance for having a little bit more, not serious, because we are always serious with what we do, but with more recognized visibility, for instance. That was more my question. Do you think you will have this chance to take something back in the real world of all this for you as a return, as a recognition for your work and your values?
I think so. I think similarly to artists, when you're working in a space that maybe your voices aren't as amplified, or if you're a minority group, working in kind of activist kind of a nature, you're always, like Helena said, you're always determined to kind of jump through those hoops and be creative about how to be seen. And I don't think the COVID situation was necessarily something that made Kleio want to be heard. We would have kind of done something similar with regardless of COVID or not. But I think the trigger for this particular project was the COVID situation. And it wasn't a point where we already knew we wanted to be a collective, we already knew what we wanted to do, but we wanted the work to be powerful and relevant to our society and make sure that it was kind of engaging and helpful to society. And we said that if we're going to do something meaningful, we're going to have to respond to the COVID situation, because there's already so many wonderful responses out there that we need to comment on it. So I think in a way that this project will open up more opportunities for the physical world, but I would like to think that maybe the COVID situation allowed others like Kleio and artists such as yourselves to really think about the possibilities of going beyond the physical, to expand those opportunities. But I think because we're such tenacious people being creatives, we kind of inevitably do those things. It just so happened to be that we were forced in lockdown to do those things, I think.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
I think also, or at least for myself, I think lockdown kind of forced me to slow down a little bit. I wasn't able to go to the office anymore, and there are lots of projects that have been on my mind that I finally got the time to think about more thoroughly, like really get into like what is important to me and how would I like to present it once I can. So it definitely gave me a lot of time to further a lot of projects. So I think there's been a lot of introspection during COVID. So I think that's one good thing that comes out of it.
Did you enjoy this time for doing things for yourself? And it's a question that I have for every one of you. Did you enjoy to have some free time and slow down and, don't have the pressure about meeting every day with someone and apart work, but then, dentist, optician, and the friend, and this aperitif and this dinner? Did you enjoy to have this time for creating and being in connection with yourself?
I definitely have. I did get sick March, so that wasn't too fun. But as kind of as soon as I was recovered, I was like, okay, I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to like sanitize everything and be so worried. And I just have been working on personal projects since then.
Good.
Yeah, I think before lockdown, it's so easy when you're kind of trying to work to support yourself to be like, oh, I'm exhausted. I'm not gonna post that thing, or I'm not gonna like write this application. And having this time not working has been great, because it kind of gives you a taste of what it's like to not have to constantly work to try and support your practice. And it's kind of nice, but I think it's a bit frustrating, because you're like, this has been lovely, but it's obviously going to return to kind of having less time for your practice, which I'm not, it's not like I'm angry about it, but I think it makes you realize that there are some people who don't need to work as constantly to kind of maintain a practice, which is, again, it's like so full of nuance in the art world, but it has been really good to just get back to the basics of kind of like having time to research and having time to reflect, which has been really, really nice. And it's it felt like really lucky, like a horrible situation has given us all a chance to, like you say, like slow down and get a chance to kind of catch up with ourselves. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, you're very lucky as we are, like if you have the financial means to take that time to slow down, and if you can, then yeah, it's so valuable. It's been very helpful for me as well. Yeah, so it's a really hectic profession being an artist, for example. It's such, you have to be so productive, which again goes back to what Lidia has been talking about, the kind of capitalism as well. It's this kind of like, we want to counter capitalism, but at the same time we are really forcing ourselves to be really productive all the time in order to kind of get ourselves out there, to get ourselves known. Yeah, so on that topic, what are you thinking, like when you have to return to the physical? Do you feel like this time has made you realize something new in your work, that you like to work in the digital realm, or are you already thinking about works to present in the physical world once you can publicly?
I personally, and here I can connect with the Shears actually, because I literally talked with Maria, that is one of the founder of Shears. If someone of you doesn't know what is Shears, is an incredible project. More than an incredible project, is a very good project that comes from an incredible group of ladies. They are called, the organization is called Lone Art, and they do social art or art. They use art, through art, they underline social issues. And Shiro's is their main project, and is focusing on women issues. And when there's been the lockdown, actually, we meant to have, like if it's me, Shiro's, but no, I'm feeling really supportive towards them. I met them and I love them. They are Spanish, they are so full of energy and love for what they do, and they are just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And they in November, for the 25th of November, I think that the opening was on the 22nd, possibly, or the 23rd. They launched Shiros Revolutionary, Shiros Revoluciones was with the Spanish language. That was I think the third of the event of Shiros. But because they had some funding, they decided, was divided in two parts, this exhibition. So at some point in December, January, they got in touch asking to the artists that they participate, and I was one of them, and was my first time collaborating with them. Are you interested? You want to show more of your stuff? And they asked me, I don't know why, but they asked me, do you want to do a performance? And I had an idea a few weeks ago about doing something that can be a performance, but I didn't know where to show it. So I thought it was becoming a video, and it was so different about my stuff. Generally, my work before this idea and before the lockdown is just so heavy. It's just so heavy. It's not ironic, opposite than Lauren, that is actually quite ironic, but also Aisha, I saw that there are things that they can be ironic. My work is just, no, I'm pissed off. You need to know that I'm pissed off. I want that you became pissed off as I am pissed off. Not irony at all. Instead, when I had this idea about the performance, was just, was funny, at least in my mind, must be funny. And just 1 week before the performance, it's been the lockdown. So I talked with Maria a few days ago, and they are starting to think, September, October, maybe we will go back to Shiros, because now they decide, as Kleio, they decide to do a Shiros quarantine, that is for showing the vision and the point of view of women artists and story of women in quarantine. But they still have this project because they also publish a magazine. And with the project, there was not, the exhibition was the main event, but they published a magazine, they had planned a talk with a lot of very interesting panelists and workshops. So clearly it's their baby. They don't want to let it go in that way. They look forward for doing it. And Maria was telling me that they are starting to think maybe September, maybe October, but they are waiting for August to understand what will happen, because, you know, they are starting to talk about the second wave of the pandemic. So you can't really decide to do something until we have the directive of the government. So for me, I look forward to that. And then during the last bits of the quarantine, the waiting room has been the last piece of my work. Over the quarantine. The one before was quite heavy again, and a lot of research. Instead, the last part, the waiting room, working with Mr. Slimbones, I love it. It was just such a fun, and I really would like to, I don't know, just to do for a little bit stuff that makes me feel just a little bit light and having some fun. Because unfortunately, at the end of the day, as much as we say that internet is great, social media are great because they help you to push out your voice, I must say it's very difficult, because at the end of the day, if you want people following and sharing and whatever, you need to have a massive amount of followers. Otherwise you have always that little bit. And then when you discover that friends that you have and you say, oh wow, how can you have 50,000 followers? They don't tell you, but after a few years, maybe you discover that actually they bought them in the beginning, because the theory is that if you buy them, at some point, other people, they start to follow you because you have a lot of followers. And it just, I guess, my principle to do something like that. And so I don't know how many people actually, they care about what I do, about my message, and I quite need a little time just for enjoying something, for being lighter. This is my main plan, if I will be able.
You definitely have one more follower in a minute.
Thank you. One day, if I will become rich, I will pay you. I will pay you a holiday or something like that.
Yeah, what brings you guys joy on the internet? Then, speaking of joy on the internet, what makes you happy on the internet?
Learning and connecting.
I love to watch podcasts online on YouTube. Makes me feel like I have friends, even though those people have no idea who I am. Yeah, sometimes I just enjoy being around like people who are speaking and talking lightheartedly. I'm not really looking for like a piece of entertainment per se, like a movie or a show. Sometimes I just want to hear people speak. And sometimes while I'm, either designing or working on things like mundane things around the house, especially nowadays that we've become so domestic, it really is comforting to me to listen to people talk and see people talk about anything, really.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And constant stream of podcasts. And also just, I think that I have been being drawn to like lighter media and just like funny, the dumbest things that I can find. That's like been a little glimmer of something normal.
Exactly.
I agree. It's just like the most banal, like boring everyday things that are just like a bit stupid have been like such a good way of just being able to like not physically but like get outside of like the current everyday situation. My sister, because I'm a bit like an old man when it comes to the internet, it feels like I'm a bit behind, and my sister has just forced me to get TikTok, and I really don't know what I'm doing, but I'm like really enjoying watching like the most basic like animal videos, and I'm just like, I feel like I'm about 20 years behind. But I think when you've had like such a heavy day trying to do stuff, it's like, yeah, I just want to watch like some tadpoles being like hatched into frogs. And I think just being able to use it like not just for serious and like really intense research and kind of publishing and activism, it's really nice just to be able to use it for just entertainment. And I agree, when I'm kind of going around the house doing like all of the jobs, which I think you forget when you have other things to do, you don't realize how much of your time you actually just spend maintaining like your home. And now it seems like that's like the only thing I'm doing, and it's driving me a bit nuts. So like being able to listen to something that's like anything else makes it feel like it's a bit less kind of 1950s like housewife. It makes me I'm escaping that like, oh my god, that kind of constant just home, because we've all been there for months now. So yeah, I think just anything light-hearted.
Yeah, I can't agree with that. I've been watching a lot of plant videos online and just kind of consuming myself with indoor plant tips and learning that way about that as well. But then I think even though you're consuming light material online, if you see it as kind of because every YouTube hit gets like, well, if a YouTuber has a lot of watchers, then they get that's their salary, right? So I think even though it's something lighthearted, you can still be quite political in what you choose to watch. So you can support feminists online by watching their content, or follow people maybe who like, instead of watching a white man talking about his plants, I could follow a black woman talking about her plants, and then give her more views, but also just really get more diverse and more interesting content in that way that is still lighthearted, maybe not diehard activism, but you can be activist in your choices, I think.
A friend of mine a few days ago is a gentleman, and he's an engineer, and he's very feminist. He has this idea already a few years ago. He decided for having variety in his company, he need to employ women. So he strongly believe about how women, they can improve and change it. And we were talking about all the madness of COVID and the change and what will be after. And he wrote me these few lines in this email that roughly they were just saying it's useless try to change the rest of the world. If you change yourself, at some point you discover that you are part of the we, and we is part of the universe, and we will change, starting to change something just in ourselves. So you're totally correct. The personal choice that you're doing is just so important. Also, if it seems that it's just, oh, it's nothing. It's not nothing. You know, is something, is a little drop in the ocean, but the ocean is made with little drops. So it's just very, very important. You're totally correct.
Really interesting is like, I think with kind of being able to choose exactly what we watch and exactly who we follow and what we kind of surround ourselves with, I feel like previous generations haven't really had that choice. Like, it's been dictated to them, like what they read in the newspaper or like what is on the news, and it's definitely been very biased. And being able to be like, okay, well, I'm going to really think about who I follow, and I'm going to think about like their message and who they are and like what they are in aid of, is really nice to be able to have that control and be like, okay, so we like personally can't control a huge tabloid paper and what they like spew into the world, but I can control like who I watch, and you can like really like benefit from that, but also like help other people, like you mentioned, with kind of like the following and the watching, which I feel like before social media, you can't, like, people couldn't control what was very easily kind of printed in the news and things like that, and being able to be interacted like both ways, so not just being able to like follow people, but being able to kind of also control what you put out there is really interesting. And I think it's definitely a driving force for like positive change.
especially with kind of the monetization of YouTube ads, things like that. I realized when I was doing a lot of research on how I can support the Black Lives Matter movement, I really wanted to make conscious choices of who I'm going to donate to, but also knowing that I don't really have a lot of money to donate to as well. So there are a lot of posts trying to help people who might not financially be able to support, and how they can like watch and stream people on YouTube to help them with their AdSense. So in a way, you don't even really have to give a lot from your own pocket. It's just by like the kind of choices that you make that are actually making a financial difference to certain charities and people. So I think even though the monetization of the internet or social media can become very problematic or political, I'm really glad to see that it has been used in a very positive way too.
And that's a very creative way to use it, because that's not really what it was meant for, right? So it's kind of manipulating digital in a really positive way to benefit from it. That's a really good point. I think we have to cut it short now because we've talked for a while. It's been really interesting, but I would like to hear before we end it, just like what's next for you guys. What are you working on at the moment, and how can we keep following you?
Sorry.
I've been working on I have kind of multiple practices, I feel like, but I've been working on a music video for a friend of mine who's a queer Black artist who's putting out music for the first time. I made a music video for him recently. And I've been working on just developing my skills in other areas, making clothes, crocheting, and I got a sewing machine this quarantine. So I've been kind of just developing a lot of skills and really reflecting on what I'm doing, but there's definitely some things coming up.
Oh, sorry, I need to put in charge of my computer.
I'm trying to think. So I've been spending a lot of this quarantine thinking about what I can do when I'm like back in my home and able to like physically make work, but I really want to think about how that works in the digital world, and I'm not really sure how that's going to materialize yet. I'm thinking of using, because I always seem to use quite like traditional like domestic methods, so like decoupage and things like that, and how they work in like such a modern digital time. And I'm thinking of processing that into like the home, which you spent so much time in, and thinking about how things in the home are put like out into the internet, but how it can work both ways, and kind of how I can turn these kind of thoughts into physical objects for the home. Whether they're actually useful or not, I'm not sure, but how we can kind of, instead of just using our like anger or frustration in the digital world, how that can translate into things in the home. Not quite sure how it's going to materialize yet, but hopefully at some point it will. So yeah, there's things happening. we'll see when they actually come to light, but yeah, just a lot of planning has been happening.
For me, as I said before, I really want to do something for having fun, and I hope that She Heroes Revoluciones will happen, so I will have the chance finally to do the performance. But I really hope for Anneasha and for everyone in the United States that Trump won't win again the election. So because I wrote 4 episodes for realizing this video with Lady T and Baby T, that is one of my projects. I have this doll that is like Trump and is dressed up in gold, and his mom is all dressed up with leopard stuff, and she goes around with a lot of money and a gun. And so I wrote 4 episodes for them last summer for doing a mini series, a mini video. And I didn't have time ever because so many things happened. But I have really to oblige myself to do it because I know that they will kick him out. They have to kick him out in November. There is nothing, I mean, it's impossible. And I hope so much. So I have to force myself to do these videos before starting to have fun. And I say I have to force because it's been literally difficult follow during all the pandemic stuff, all what happened in United States. I'm really so sorry for you. I think that it's been very tough for all of you, more than for other people. So I will force myself to hopefully realize this, and then I will have a lot of fun.
I guess for Kleio, we were really excited to launch the show with more than 30 artists around the world participating. And we still think that we're getting such great feedback, and we really don't see this as the end of the project. It's really hard to, especially when it's a digital project. But we hope to do some kind of physical translation of it. Whether or not it would be an exact translation, because that would be almost impossible for some of the works, but to kind of embody it as a kind of a physical extension of the project. Because I really do see the internet as an extension of the world and not a substitution of it, as how we kind of see it now with the COVID lockdown. So hopefully we can do a reverse of like taking a digital project in space and then making the physical one an extension of that, which would be really interesting.
That sounds really exciting.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm very excited to follow what you're going to be up to in the next coming months and in the future. Yeah, and the same goes for the rest of you. I'm really looking forward to kind of just, now that I've been introduced to your work, I'm really looking forward to see what you'll be up to in the future. So thanks so much for joining us today, and thanks Kleio, thanks Kana for inviting me to take part in the conversation. It's been really insightful.
Of course. Yeah, thank you guys so much, like for everyone for participating and being part of this discussion. It was really awesome.
Once again, thank you for listening. If you want to explore some of the references and resources mentioned in the discussion, please do check them out in the description, wherever this is posted.